Well, welcome everyone who's here, those who have come in. At 10:30, I'm always nervous. And then by 10:50, it's better. So people are still used to getting in the routine of coming to church. So we're glad wherever you're watching from online, we have some on there. I'm tuning in. So if you watch from Facebook and you make comments, I'll try to respond to you. I like to see who's there. And so I'm excited. We're getting to start a new series. If you know me, I'm all about series, plural of series. And this one's been stirring in my heart for a few weeks, several weeks now. I'm going to start with a story here from basketball. I remember the time and place and situation that I thought my life was pretty much over, but for sure my high school basketball career was over. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in my grade 12 year. We were playing a tournament at North Battleford Composite High School. It was a fairly significant big city tournament, and we were a small city or a small school, and so it was a pretty big deal. I think it was the second game, and we were in this intense battle with the team. I don't remember which team it was, but I remember it was really close, and they were leading by a few points, and we were famous for our press, our full court pressure, and our defense, and so we had been instituting some presses, and we had scored a few baskets, and momentum was with us, and we were catching up. And of course, it was up and down, up and down. And in my grade 12 year, I pretty much played every minute, if you watched basketball back then. Didn't get subbed off, so I was fairly used to it. We had other players that when you get going a bit, they got a little tired, so one player was getting tired. So our coach decided to sub someone in and out. And it became quickly apparent that within a few minutes, the person that got subbed in, we'll call him Frank. There was no Frank on our team, but I don't want to throw Frank under the bus. But it became apparent that Frank didn't really know what was going on. I think it was a quick substitution, hey, he's tired, he's got to come off. And in the press, the full court press, and on defense, Frank wasn't where he should be, and the other team got some points. And by my grade 12 year, it was me and a bunch of younger guys, and so at times it was a little frustrating working with them. And so I remember I was very competitive, maybe still am a little bit, but especially back then. I had a good relationship with my coach. Many of you might know him as Pastor Gallen. Now he pastors a church in Edmonton. But I still remember this to this day. I was very frustrated that the person that got subbed in didn't know where they were supposed to be. And so as I was dribbling the ball up through the press that they had, and I came up and I remember dribbling up close to him, and in a very aggressive, probably louder than I should have voice, said, "Frank does not know what he's doing out here. If you sub someone in, you need to figure it out." Said that. Yes, if you know Pastor Gallen and the situation of the school I grew up in, yeah, you probably thought what I thought. I thought, that's it? As I was bouncing the basketball and everything, this was all running through my mind. I thought, that's it. And I went ahead to the apologies I was going to have to make for the team, probably the school, probably the whole world. I was picturing losing my captaincy, which a few times in my career I almost did for things like that. And then I was picturing lines. And if you've ever ran lines, you start at the baseline and you run to the foul line. If you don't know basketball, I don't know how to explain the foul line. About a quarter of the way down, and then you come back to the end line, and then you go to the midcourt, and then come back to the end line, and then you go to the other foul line 3/4 of the way down, and you come back to the end line, and then you go all the way to the other side of the court and come back, and that was a set of lines, and we did those frequently. But when you really messed up, you did towels. Who remembers towels? Anyone ever heard of towels? That was frequent, again, in the school I grew up. But that's when you would put a towel on the ground like this. I'm not even going to try it because I would probably hurt myself irreparably right now. But you put a towel on the ground like this, and then you push the towel on the ground while doing those same lines. And if you've ever had quads burn and blood rush to your head, I've seen many of strong high school boys thinking they're men collapse and almost cry like little babies doing those. And I was picturing, this is it. I'm going to be doing lines forever. I said to my coach, figure it out, and I could see the stunned look in his face as he processed what to do with me. And I still remember it to this day. He looked back at me, and I thought, And we probably hashed it out a little bit after that, but somehow in the moment he had grace. He was showing God's characteristics of mercy. And he looked at me and he said, "You figure it out." And something switched in me because I realized as a captain, as a leader on a team, I could sit there and look to blame the coach for what was going on, look for other circumstances, other reasons of why this person, Frank, didn't know what was going on. But as a main leader, could I have figured it out and told him what to do? Absolutely. And so instead of kind of passing the buck or looking someone else to blame and shame, he looked at me and said, "You figure it out. You figure it out." If you're watching today, if you're in here today, why don't you look at your neighbor and say, "Figure it out." If you're watching today. If you're watching today online, why don't you type in the chat, "Figure it out, Pastor Derek." So if you're watching today, say that, "Pastor Derek, figure it out." Hi, Chris Shingoose. Bernie's there. Jen Link, good morning. Alex Sinclair's watching, Leah Link. Why don't you type "figure it out"? We're going to try to figure it out over the next few weeks. And I don't know about you, but I've had many times where I've had to try to figure it out. I don't know how well I always do it, but parenting, any parents? There's a lot of figuring it out, sometimes on the fly. And what worked for one kid does not work for the next. And you thought, "I had this." And then you came along, and I don't have anything. And we were just having a conversation. Matt, our electric player here, he came in a little frazzled, with his hair looking really good, though, so you managed to have time to do that. But that's because he had a lot of time, because he was supposed to be bringing his teenage kid and other kid that are getting older with him. And he said something about, we were talking about kids, and he's like, "Yeah, but you wait till they're teenagers." He's like, "I couldn't get them out of bed this morning." He's like, "I thought I had it figured out," and so, trying to figure that out. But parenting is something you have to figure out. Preaching. Is this going to work? This doesn't work? A lot of figuring out, what do I have to? A lot of mine is taking stuff out. No, I don't need that. I got to make this clear. This doesn't work with this. Figuring it out. I had to figure out how to do websiting. Is that even a word? Websiting? The case or the duty of websiting or doing websites. About, I don't know how many years ago, several years ago, a few years ago, I took over our church website because I got frustrated with where it was at, which was one page that was the same for about 3 years straight with nothing changing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And so everything's pretty accessible by Google these days, as well as our app, right? I had to figure out an app. I did not get trained growing up in Bible college on apping. I don't even think it was a thing back in the day. When I was in Bible college, they had no such things as apps. So I didn't get trained in apping. I had to figure it out. Live streaming, figure it out. Husbanding. I have not figured it out. Come on, any guys in this place? Murray, you're still figuring it out, right, Murray? You're still working on it? How many years of marriage, you two? 55 years. I'm just going to say, if you're struggling on figuring it out, go talk to them. They ain't no picnic to be around. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. They're great. They're great. But if you've been 55 years of marriage, you know there's sometimes you've had to try to figure it out. So husbanding, even teaching, renovating, all those sorts of things. We face things in life that we have to figure out. And actually, we probably don't realize it, but the idea of figuring or figures is very prevalent in what we do, even in numbers. They call them financial figures. What are the figures? Give me the figures. I need to know where we're at. I need the financial figures. I need the numbers. They use the term figure in that. How about your body? How many here is full-figured people? You don't have to put up your hand. How about dad bods? You don't have to put up your hand. Babe, your figure's fine. All right, so even body shape, you talk about your figure in terms of the body. Importance, a noticeable important part of something. It was a few times of going out with this girl, and I realized quickly she was going to figure greatly in my life. That person was going to become a prominent figure in my life, a father figure. We're going to celebrate father figures in a few weeks. Of importance. And your brain works like this. Consider, expect to be the case. That's what I figured. I figured it out. Your brain working with figures. We all have, a saying along these lines. So for instance, when I yelled at my coach and I said, figure it out. And I thought, man, my coach is going to make me do all this. But instead, all my coach said back to me is, you need to figure it out. And so something like scenario like that, my coach didn't give me lines, didn't do all this, and then I say something like, go figure. You ever heard that? Like after something like that? Or I planned an outing outside, and the weather forecast said it was going to be sunny and 32 degrees, and right before we went to go outside, it started to rain. Go figure. Right? So we use this idea of figuring it out frequently. And so whether it be numbers we're compiling, importance we are placing on something, our brains we're using, when we break down our days, we're really just trying to do our best to make sure we figure it out, that we come up with a way to figure out how to be a good, fill in the blanks, a good parent, a good pastor, a good employee, a good employer, a good boss, a good worker, a good teacher, a good friend, a good brother, a good sister. I'm going to have to go slower. Matt's interpreting. I'm not used to this. I think he is, right? Is that what you're doing, Matt? Or maybe they're just chatting. I was like, I heard there was a French person here, and so maybe he's interpreting for somebody. A good brother, sister, you try to figure it out to be good. Or in the case of this series, as you're going to find out, to be super. Come on, look at your neighbor and say super. Robert John Lee, figure it out. Thank you. Adrian Thomas. Pastor Derek, figure it out. Kiana, figure it out. Pastor Derek. Linda Sanderson. Chrissy. Jen Link, thank you. Liz, good to see you. Figure it out. Jonathan Cook. Wow. Thank you, guys. That's from before when I said figure it out. Super. So instead, you're trying to figure out how to be a super parent, a super boss, a super brother, a super sister, a super, fill in what applies to you. A super husband, a super wife, a super boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, super. And in a Christian context, if you're churched and you're familiar with the church terms, instead of good, you're not only trying to be good at something, you're trying to be godly. And not only super at something, maybe supernatural at something. And so we're going to talk about figuring it out. As Tanika said at the beginning in the announcements, we're going to talk about releasing, reflecting, and flexing the super inside of you. Do you guys know there's some super on the inside of you? Do you know that? Oh, I don't know if you guys believe it. How many of you know you were created with some super on the inside of you? And I believe God's having me come over these next few weeks and tell you there's some super waiting to be released. There's some super waiting to be reflected. I'll get into that next week. And there's some super. Some of you need to start flexing your super. That's in a few weeks. So you won't want to miss it, but we're going to jump into that over the next 3 weeks. So Father God, we just thank you for what you have in store for us this week, next week, and as we go into Father's Day, as we honor father figures, as we bless them, Lord God, that you just do something in people's hearts, that we don't leave the same way that we came, that my words, Father, are the words you want to say, that my heart is the heart that you have, that you can interrupt anything that we have going on, and that we're led by you, God, and that you speak to lives, and we leave different than the way we came in. In Jesus' name, everyone said. We're going to look at James 1:19-27 as we figure out how to release the super in us today. And I'm going to read the whole set of scriptures from 19-27. It's going to be the core text that we use for the next 3 weeks, and then I'm going to just jump off from parts of this as we get into it. But I thought I would read it. It's in the Good News translation, and it says this: "Remember this, my dear friends. Everyone must be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to become angry. Human anger does not achieve God's righteous purpose, so get rid of every filthy habit and all wicked conduct. Submit to God and accept the word that he plants in your hearts, which is able to save you. Do not deceive yourselves by just listening to his word. Instead, put it into practice." We're going to come back to that. "If you listen to the word but do not put it into practice, you are like people who look in a mirror and see themselves as they are. They take a good look at themselves, go away, and at once forget what they look like. But if you look closely into the perfect law that sets people free and keep on paying attention to it, and do not simply listen and then forget it, but put it into practice, you will be blessed by God in what you do. Do any of you think you are religious? If you do not control your tongue, your religion is worthless and you deceive yourselves." Man, there's so much here. We'll come to that later. You get to look forward to that verse. What God the Father considers to be pure and genuine religion is this: to take care of orphans and widows in their suffering and to keep oneself from being corrupted by the world. James 1:19 to 27. Here's the question I have for people today. If you were to be a superhero, what would your superpower be? Come on, if you're watching on Facebook today, and I want you to let me know. If you're watching on YouTube, let them know. They got some people watching at the back doing the live stream. Tell them what kind of superpower, if you were a superhero, what superpower would you want? I'm going to ask you in this place today. If you were a superhero, someone come on, put up your hand or yell it out. What superpower do you wish you could have? Anybody? So quiet. What was that? Cleaning? Thank you, Alex. I heard someone say fly, I think. I've never thought of cleaning as a superpower. Anybody else? Miracle worker, like Jesus. Superpower? Oh, invisible, yes. Somebody said shape-shifting. Jen Link said to fly. That's a good one. Chris Shingu said to many places and same time. Teleportation, that was mine. Yeah, or teleportation. To be able to just be like, I want to be in Disney World, on the ride. And they're like, how'd you get here? That would be a fun one. I thought of one to be able to learn things like super fast. You go to play the piano and just, like Groundhog Day. Who's watched that? He did the day over and over and he got good at everything. That would be a fun superpower. Teleportation, Carrie Lynn. Speed is another one. I think going fast, not the other speed. I knew Brad would get that. I didn't know if many people would get that. I think some thought it was a superpower. Okay. Yeah. All right, so superpower. If there was a superpower, what would it be? And so the first figure we're going to look at for this series, number one, part one, we're calling this action figure. Who's ever heard of an action figure? You guys heard of action figures? I tried to collect some action figures. It wasn't great. I was looking for some Avenger ones, and I just couldn't track them down. But maybe these are some modern ones. Oh, I made him talk. I don't know how I did that.
Approaching destination. Area secure. Buzz Lightyear. Action.
Okay, so we got Buzz Lightyear. He's kind of an action figure. He does some stuff. He says some stuff. Oh, boy. I stood it up. There we go. Oh. So we got a Buzz Lightyear, and of course, if you have a Buzz Lightyear, you got to have this little guy. Is that Woody from Toy Story? And then we got a few of these. These are what I grew up on. These things called Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye, Robots in Disguise. No, all right, yeah, that was some there. So these transform. I actually tried to transform them. They're pretty basic. One of them I couldn't even make work. One of them I could. Yeah, I think there we go. I'd have to get Alex up here to do something and help me out. Anyways, so these are kind of action-type figures. You can picture we have a few Avengers in here, like Thor, the Hulk, Iron Man. I don't know. Matt would know every one of them probably. No? All right. So part one is going to be about action figures. And here's the question. What would it do if a superhero was made after you right now? If someone were to look at your life, look at you, and make a superhero based on you, what would it do? Based on where you're at right now. What superhero costume would it have? Would you have? Tights, little red tights, or I don't know, or more like Iron Man, a suit. But that's the question. What would it do if a superhero was made after you? So many superpowers are different, but guess what? Whether they're big and grand, or when we issue the teleporting or speed or flying and all these things, guess what? One thing that they have in common is in order for a superpower to actually be super, you must be willing to put it in action. Like if Batman hid in his cave the whole time, he could be as strong as super as he wanted, but if he didn't put it into action, you'd never know that he was super. So no matter what kind of superhero we're talking about or action figure, they must become a figure of action. That's why they're called action figures, because they do something to release that super, to show that super. They're willing to take action for that super. So one of the best ways to figure out the super in you is to become an action figure. Who's ready to become an action figure today? We got any Buzz Lightyears in the house? Any Buzz Lightyears online? Hello, Hugh says Hugh's watching. Alex Kristen says she would love to have the cleaning one as well. Oh, Alex is going to transform some things. These are his sons. He's going to figure it out. It's fine if it leaves it. Oh, that was pretty easy. No, wait. Two of them I could get, and the other two I couldn't. So, or I didn't know how they needed to be. Jeez. Thanks a lot, Alex. I guess we all know who's closer to being an action figure. I got some more work to do than him. So, they can transform. Neat. So one of the best ways to figure out the super in you is to become an action figure. We're going to go back to James 1:19 and start again at the beginning here in the Good News Translation. It says, "Remember this, my dear friends. Everyone must be quick to listen." Say, quick to listen. But slow to speak. Say, slow to speak. And slow to become angry. Say, slow to become angry. I want to point this out, kind of, the idea of quick to listen and slow to speak, slow to angry. Sometimes we think all actions are actually doing something or doing more. There is a deliberate action which actually could be deciding to do less. So just because maybe there's some inactivity, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not doing action. You could be choosing to be slow to speak as an action. Come on, I don't know, are you getting this? Or slow to hear could be a choice. That could be an action you do. And I'm here to tell somebody, to tell myself this, that man, if we could just get those three things, I think there would be a lot of people that would think we're pretty super. There might be some husbands or wives that would be like, man, our relationship has changed. It's become a whole lot more super because I learned to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. If you're trying to go, hey, how can I become a superhero? What's some superpower that I could release on the inside of me? Guys, Christians, or if you're not just coming in today, guess what? Any relationship in your life will change on these three things. And ultimately, everything in life comes down to relationship interaction. It does. Jobs, brothers and sisters, siblings, marriage, flipping someone off in the car as they cut you off, road rage. That's a relationship tension. That person is angering me. Well, they didn't know until you said thanks. We had a good conversation about that. But quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Can you imagine if we just did those three things superly? If we took that action, man, things would change. I'm convicted by that, so I'm not coming up here on this stage and being like, I've got this worked out. Oh my goodness. All right, let's keep moving on. Verse 20. Human anger does not achieve God's righteous purpose. Verses that just hit home. Just hit home. Listen, the Bible says be angry and sin not. So there's a holy anger that can come on. But most of our anger, if we're being honest, is human. And if I just need to say this in light of where we've come from in the last year, if people looked at this verse, a lot of things would have to get dialed back. Human anger, let me read it right from here. Human anger, where am I? Human anger does not achieve God's righteous purpose. Come on, write that down, put it on a plaque, paste it all over Facebook, paste it all over social media. Human anger does not achieve God's righteous purpose. Oh, I don't know if some people got that. Somebody online needs to hear this. You think your anger is superhuman? It's not. And it's not achieving God's righteous purpose. Some is. So it's not saying that you, again, there's be angry and sin not. There's some anger that's holy. But I think a lot of it comes from fleshly desire to, I don't know, be right, probably. Anyways, I move on. So get rid of every filthy habit and all wicked conduct. Another line, my goodness. I preached a few months ago about the small, consistent daily. Here it is again, getting brought up here, and James is bringing it up. Get rid of every filthy habit or routine that doesn't work for you in wicked conduct. Submit to God, accept the word that he plants in your hearts, which is able to save you. Do not deceive yourselves. You're going to hear a bunch of that over today. By just listening to his word instead, put it into practice. Here's some actions. Get rid of every filthy habit. Change some routines. If you're wondering why some things aren't super in your life, adjust some habits. Adjust some routines. I don't want to re-preach that because I did a whole series on that. But if you're going, man, this really isn't super in my life, change your habits. Man, I'm really, okay, I'm just going to, let's go for it. Man, I'm having a tough time with, I don't know if I should. Help me, Jesus. I want to know how much I should step on toes and go after it. Hallelujah. I'll move on. Glory to God. Woo! Change your habits. That's what I'll say. You guys can let the Holy Spirit convict you where you're at. I've got my own. But if you're wanting some things to change, or you're wondering why things are like that, but you're doing the same things, and you're like, this isn't very super, do this. Take this action. All right. Submit to God. Submit to God, another action. Learn how to submit to God, his purpose. We sang about it. On earth as in heaven, his will, his kingdom. There's a God's way of doing something. And if you learn to submit to that, to come under that, to allow that to direct your life, then guess what? There's some super ready to be released. Accept the word that he plants in your heart, which is able to save you. Do not deceive yourselves by just listening to the word. Instead, put it into practice. Put it into practice. Someone look at somebody beside you and say, it's time to practice. If you're watching today, let me know you're still here with me. And why don't you just type practice in the comments? And maybe if you're old enough to know about Allen Iverson and his famous interview when someone asked him why he was missing practice, and he went, practice? We talking about practice? Practice? We're talking about practice. He went on for it was like 4 minutes. And he was very bothered that as a great basketball player, he got asked if he should be at practice. But practice is important because, listen, how many of you have a seatbelt in your car that you drive? When you go into the car, there's a seatbelt there. Pretty much, that's a way for everyone to put up their hand and say yes, because there's seatbelts in every car. So how many of you have a seatbelt in your car? Oh, maybe you don't have a car. If you have a car, is there a seatbelt in it? Put up your hand. Oh, good interaction. Thank you. How many of you have ever been in a car that has a seatbelt in it? Put up your hand. There we go. Got everyone there. Chrissy's saying practice. Practice? I guess all I ever hear. Okay, we have seatbelts in the car, but guess what? If you don't put that seatbelt into practice and you get in a car accident, is that seatbelt that's in your car that's already there, is it going to help you? Is it going to help you if the seatbelt you have is not put on, it's not put into practice, it's just sitting behind your shoulder, you haven't taken it and went like this and clicked it in? Is it going to help you much just sitting in your car? You could hear everything about a seatbelt and its importance for its safety and what it does and why you do it, and you could hear all the stats, but if you don't put it into practice, it ain't going to do anything in a car accident. It's just sitting in there. It's loaded, it's ready to use, but you haven't put it into practice. Someone say it's time to practice. James says this, and he gets a little intense. He says this, that you've actually tricked or deceived yourself. Ready? You've tricked or deceived yourself into thinking you've figured it out When all you do is listen to something but don't put it into practice, he goes, man, don't deceive yourselves by just listening to the word. He goes, you've tricked yourself. In fact, I think this, he's saying, you actually have sort of become a pretender. See, we want some action figures like Avengers. We want to do some of those superpowers. But I think often we actually become pretenders, trying to be Avengers. And the difference, James says, where you deceive yourself, and is that this, the dividing line is, he says, if you just listen to the word, you're just pretending. And I say it in different ways, even in praise and worship. I say, guys, I don't want to come to church going through the motions. I don't want to come, let me say this right, because we're trying to change our language and how we see this. I don't want to come to be the church and just go through the motions. We don't come to church, we come to be the church. The church is not a building. We've said that many ways, but we're trying to add clarity to that. We can't come to be the church and just go through the motions. If you come see, I got too much. God's in this place and things are, I'm getting on rabbit trails. But listen, if you just want to come to church, then you can come and just sit here and sit by yourself and do nothing and not engage with anyone else and then leave. Then you've come to church. But if you come to be the church, you can't just come and sit in a seat and mind your own business and sit here and then leave. See, we've been saying it wrong. We've been getting it wrong. We think just coming to church and not doing any action, not anything like that is okay because we just think we have to come to church. Choking on my own spit here. I'm getting excited. But if we think we have to come to be the church, then it's different. Or how about this? We don't get to come and come to church and put our church on and then walk out the door and think, I'm done for the week. In fact, man, this isn't in my notes, but this is good. It's blessing me. We come to be the church, or we come to get equipped to learn how to be the church better when we come on Sundays. Or watching on Sundays or Mondays. We come to go get encouraged and go, how can I be the church better? So that when I walk out the doors, I'm like, I am now ready to be the church everywhere I go. And it takes action. Lights, cameras, action. And so we deceive ourselves, we're pretenders if all we do is listen but don't put it into practice. If all we do is come to church and sit and think, that's the duty. No. It's to be the church and put it into action. Action figures don't figure their super out by pretending. They figure it out by practicing. Batman and Alfred, Bruce Wayne and Alfred, in his cave, he had to learn how to navigate what he was stepping into. Spider-Man, and swinging into the wrong things as he was figuring out how to use the super that was inside of him. As he discovered this, he had to put it into practice. He had to practice it. If you watched Avengers, the Hulk, he had to learn to control his rage as he changed over and he was demolishing everything because he had to learn how to put it into practice so that when he went to do it, he'd know how to do it. And if they didn't ever practice it, it would just sit there and probably not work or go crazy when it did. But you don't figure out your super by pretending. You figure it out by practicing. Who's heard practice makes perfect? Anybody? I'm glad we got, oh my goodness, 11:40. You guys got to listen faster. Gosh. Practice makes perfect. I actually kind of disagree with that statement. Because if you practice the wrong things, it'll actually make imperfectness. So I heard this growing up to kind of fix it. Perfect practice makes perfect. But again, perfection never exists. Actually, in most of the times in the Bible, the word perfect actually means fully developed or mature. It doesn't mean without mistakes or never getting it wrong. It means you're fully developed and mature, but that's another thing. But this is the way I've said it. Practice makes permanent. Like permanent markers, right, Shelley? She commented on the one post. Permanent markers are permanent as well, and parents know that. But practice makes permanent. Whatever you practice eventually becomes permanent in your life, right or wrong. Right, Charlene? Right or wrong. And so the danger is we come into church and we hear some super preaching, some super instructions. We get excited about it and we hear it and we go, this is really good. Man, I have some super. Derek got up today and he said there's some super ready to be released. There's things God's put in us or something inside of me that's ready to step into. I'm ready to see some super relationship and some super blessings in my life and all this super. And we hear it and we go, woo, that's really good. But there's some super things you can't learn from just preaching. You can only learn from practicing. People thought I was pretty good at basketball. And I had some people come up and be like, oh, you're just really gifted at it. Which may have been the case, but they didn't see the hours of practicing in the gym. Hours. And if you, any major super athlete, somebody who's super at something, guess what? They've put in hours of practice. Practice. Sorry, every time I say it. You got to watch the interview. Allen Iverson practice. It's pretty funny. But they've put in hours of practice. They've figured out ways to put what they've got. If I had some giftings in it, I found a way to put it into action. Come on, someone say action figure. If you're watching today, some of you said that very lethargically. Action figure. Means I'm going along. Hey, there's practice. Oh, Nicole Melnichuk, aren't you clever? If you're not on Facebook, you missed her fun, because I said put practice in the comments, and you know what she wrote? Practice in the comments. It's not funny, guys. Don't encourage her. Alex, my wife, what is happening? It's like a comedy show and getting heckled. Where was I? Oh, if you're watching today on Facebook, guess what? I want you to put a superhero emoji. Guess you can find it. If you're watching today, you can just type in superheroes and the little emoji will come up. It's a guy with a cape or a girl with a cape with these red glasses. So let me know you're still watching. You haven't fallen asleep. I got less time than I have, so I got to keep going. James 1:22 says this, be ye doers of the word, referencing and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. When we are self-deceived, which means you haven't put it into practice, where it starts to become permanent, we convince ourselves that we're super in something that we actually may not be that super in, or maybe even be called to be super in. The quick example, I'm going to give you the quick version of this. I had some details on it, but I want to save some time. Who's seen the movie Troy? It's from it's older. Troy. I'll just say right now, if you've seen the movie Troy, there is a fast forward scene in that. That's what we called it back in the day, when there was a decent movie, but there was a part that, wasn't acceptable. And so it's called a fast forward scene. So I'm not like saying watch it, but if you do, it's been a while since I've watched it. But there's a fast forward scene that's a little bit raunchy. But the story is Troy, King Priam, I do believe, was the king of Troy. And they had a big fortress and they had an amazing army and no one could invade them. And the king Agamemnon of Greece was coming in and he was dominating territory. And anyways, this big battle was about to ensue, for many reasons that they show in the story. And Achilles, if you've heard Achilles, Greek kind of gods and some of that stuff, was the major battle person for King Agamemnon of Greece, Agamemnon. And he didn't like the king very much, so he wasn't sure if he was wanting to be in this battle. And Hector was the son of the king of Troy. He was the prince. And so they were kind of battling it out, and Achilles thought, man, I don't even want to get in this battle. And so Achilles had brought his nephew to the battle, who was a lot younger but looked exactly like him. And his nephew was like, come on, let me fight. And Achilles is like, not yet. You're not ready. You haven't had enough practice. Not yet. Not ready. And so Achilles said, we're going to leave the next day. We're not going to battle. I don't like the king. They had a bad argument. And so when the armies of the Greek armies were going to attack Troy, Achilles was sleeping in his tent, not knowing what was going on. And Patroclus, Achilles' nephew, thought, hey, I'm going to put on Achilles' armor, and they had helmets that kind of went like this and then covered everything up. And he's like, I'm going to pretend to be Achilles in this battle. And so when he went out there, he looked exactly like Achilles. And so Achilles' men that were famous for fighting followed him into battle, and they got this big battle scene between Hector, the prince of Troy, and Achilles, and they're going at it, and there's this big thing, and you know how in the fights they surround him, and everyone stands in a circle and watches it, and Hector got the winning blow, and everyone's kind of shocked, and he goes and kneels down as what he thinks is Achilles laying there, and he takes off the helmet, and in a moment he realizes that it wasn't Achilles, it was just a pretender. And he knew in that moment everything changed, because he knew Achilles was now going to be in the war. But Patroclus thought he was ready because he had practiced enough, but he actually wasn't. And so it actually became dangerous to him, because he had heard Achilles talk about the battles. He probably actually practiced a little bit with the battles, but he had seen them and heard everything and listened and listened and listened. But because he didn't have enough practice, it actually ended up being dangerous to himself, because he thought he was ready for something when he wasn't, because he didn't put it enough into practice. He wasn't right. He had had enough practice. The Bible reference of similar thing was that of Acts 19:11-16. Who's heard of the 7 sons of Sceva? If you haven't, you can look it up. They were pretenders as well. Paul was going around having supernatural miracles, a lot of super in his life. Handkerchiefs were healing, shadows were healing, demons were getting cast out. And these 7 sons of Sceva, it implies they kind of were messing around and doing some stuff and thought, we can do this. And they basically went up and tried to do what Paul did, and encountered a strong demonic influence. And they laughed at him basically and said, Paul we know, Jesus we know, but we don't know you. And they destroyed him because they were pretenders. And so sometimes we want to jump ahead in the performance stage. We want to be Batman saving Gotham, Spider-Man swinging from the skyscrapers, the Flash running in and saving the day, Thor smashing. No, that's Hulk smashing Thor. I don't know what they all do. But they all had to learn how to use it in the cave, in the practice stage. And we can't skip the practice stage to get to the performance. See, some people here might be like, man, I just want a better relationship. I just want a better job. I just want better this. I want to get to the performance side of it where it's better. But guess what? If you're struggling with finances and somebody gives you some sound financial advice, you go to a financial advisor, you listen and hear, but you don't actually put it into practice, you can't expect things to change. If you don't take action, that part of the super will never come out of you. If you're in your relationship, you're like, man, I'd like this to be better. Maybe somebody gives you some advice, or you're going for some counseling for something you're dealing with, and you hear it. Guess what? Hearing it does not unleash or release the super inside of you. You have to hear it and then go, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to put it in action. I'm going to become a Buzz Lightyear about it. I'm going to become a Woody. I'm going to become a Transformer. I'm going to become an Avenger. I'm going to try to become an Avenger instead of being a pretender. Because I think sometimes, if we're being really honest, myself included, I probably leave a church service way more like a pretender than an Avenger. I probably watch online and leave a pretender. What I mean by that is I've heard it, but I really probably don't have a lot of plans of how to put it into action. And so James says, guys, you're just pretending. And it got quiet in here because I know, even for me, it's intense. But the reason why isn't like, oh, you just got to do this. It's because God's saying, I want to release some super inside some people who are listening today. And what starts to release the super is when we go, okay, we're going to start taking some of this. We're going to do those things that I read about quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, submit to God. We're going to start doing some of these things and putting them into action. See, because without practice, the super becomes subpar. The super becomes subpar. It's in the practice, in the willingness to do it. And there's many things that I could have gone with this in different ways about the secret place in prayer. But without practice, the super becomes subpar. I kind of had a hashtag, what's your practice? What's your practice? What's your practice? What are you practicing? John, a disciple of Jesus and someone very close to Jesus, I am sweating. Sheesh. Who watched Jesus in action said it this way. So John, who got to see Jesus, probably one of the greatest action figures to ever exist. I want to say that again. Jesus, one of the greatest action figures to ever exist. My wife got it. Come on, I know you guys are all writing, I guess. Yes, amen, right? Jesus, one of the greatest action figures to ever exist. We're getting there. John got to hang out with them, and John said this, my children, in 1 John 3:18, our love should not be just words and talk. It must be true love, which shows itself in? Which shows itself in? Shows yourself in action. True love must show itself in action. James, the brother of Jesus, who actually didn't believe initially and then got converted after the resurrection and was one of the main leaders of the church, he says this in James 2:14-17, my friends, what good is it for you, for one of you to say that you have faith if your actions do not prove it? I'm going to explain that a little bit when he says, can that faith save you? I'll explain what they mean there, but listen to this verse. This one, again, hits home. Suppose there are brothers and sisters who need clothes and don't have enough to eat. Are you ready for this? I don't know if you are. What good is there in you saying to them, God bless you? Say, what now? He says, if there are brothers and sisters who need clothes and don't have enough to eat, what good is there in you saying to them, God bless you? You know how many times God convicted me of this about a year and a half ago? Where if something happened to someone and you were like, you know, everybody says, thoughts and prayers, like something happens, like sending you thoughts and prayers. Or just saying, you know, prayers. And I used to, you know, you'd write it, prayers, but was I praying for them? No. Right? So I said, like anytime now, if I say like prayers to something, I actually stop and make sure I'm praying for them. We need to stop saying we're doing it if we're not. But on top of that, so it's like, what good is there to saying, God bless you? Watch, keep warm and eat well. Be warmed and fed, yeah, that's where it probably came from. Keep warm and eat well. It says, if you don't give them the necessities of life, they can't eat the staying. Like if I walk up and someone's starving, you say, bless you. Keep warm and eat well. And they're like, I have nothing to eat well. If you don't give them the necessities of life, so it is with faith. Are you ready? If it is alone and includes no actions, then it is dead. I'm going to say that again. If it is alone and includes no actions, your faith is dead. Now, let me tell you how I thought of this, and then I'm going to explain a few things for those of you that are getting worried kind of about works and actions, because there's a lot of discussion, dialogue, and Christian culture around this. But I grew up thinking this verse solely was the idea of faith with actions meant if I'm believing for something like a healing or a financial miracle, I had to have corresponding actions that match that. Faith sees, faith speaks, faith acts, faith reacts, you know, and that's fine, and that probably works. But if you look at the context of this scripture, they're talking about your Christianity faith, your belief in God, your faith. Like somebody says, are you a person of faith? Yes, I am. I believe in Jesus. He's my Savior. He's died and rose again. I have faith in that. So they're saying that faith, I believe this is talking about, that faith needs corresponding actions that have to deal with keeping people warm and eating well, taking care of brothers and sisters who need clothes and don't have enough to eat. That's what this is talking about with this kind of faith. And so what James is saying here is saying, listen, if you have Christianity, if you say you're a person of faith, but there's not corresponding actions, that faith is not real. You're not putting it into practice. You're not going to have some super released into you. In fact, it's going to be kind of subpar, and it is dead. You're a dead action figure, inaction figure. But I do want to qualify this for those of you as we kind of close here. I want to qualify or clear up this. Actions are not required to access salvation, but actions are required as an expression of salvation. That's the distinction, and you need to get that. Actions are not required to access salvation. We were saved by grace through faith. We cannot earn our salvation, and we don't continue to earn our salvation or our forgiveness. Like, if I follow this formula, then God will come down, and I got to earn this. No. The actions I'm talking about when it says faith with actions are dead is not this. You don't need actions to access salvation. But actions are required as an expression of salvation. Faith without an expression, without an action of salvation is useless to people around you. We've been talking a lot along these lines, but I believe God's continuing us to move in this direction. So I said it this way: actions are not required to access the super in you, but actions are required to release the super in you. When you get saved, you got super on the inside of you. And I want to say this, even if this is new to you and you're new to Christianity, you're watching for the first time, or you're visiting with us and you're like, I don't know about this saved thing. Guess what? You're made in God's image. You have super on your DNA and in your DNA. And what Jesus allows us to do is learn how to access that better, because sin comes and tries to make us subpar. So we have that in our DNA. We have the God DNA. Everyone has God DNA inside of them to make them super in the calling God has for them. And when we allow Jesus to come in, it breaks the yoke of sin and damage and destruction. It gives us the ability to walk in the super that God has for us and start to release it. And so actions start to be the thing that starts to release the super in you. So if you're sitting there going, man, why haven't I had a super relationship? Why isn't my relationship super? Have you been doing corresponding actions or putting things into practice that release that super in that relationship? My job has not been that super. I haven't been doing that well in my business. Have you been putting some habits and routines, some things into practice that allow the super to be released? Or have you just been gathering information and listening? That's one of the biggest dangers of Christians in the church who grew up in the church like I did. That, like I said, you come in and just listen. James says you're deceived. You're self-deceived, which is the worst kind of deception because you don't know you are. Most dangerous. So we started out asking the question, music team, you can come up. Give people hope today. We started out asking this question: if a superhero was made after you, what would it do? Would it be known for anger? Would it be known for, Chris Ward talked a few weeks ago about Clarence the plumber. And he said his identity was a plumber. But you know what his super strength was? Generosity. He gave. We have a washer still from Clarence. A brand new washer, ours broke down. I had a handwritten letter from Clarence, who probably wasn't the best writer, but it was from the heart. And he said in there probably, the plumber needs to bless you with. But his superpower was generosity. If a superhero, a superpower is named after Clarence, you'd know what it is. So we asked, if a superhero was made after you, what would it do? And there was many grand answers, like fly and leap over buildings in a single bound, teleport, transport, all those things, and invisible. And there's many grand things. But I want to tell you this, and I heard this in a prayer time a month ago on a Thursday, sitting right there, that started some of this message. Not all superhero actions look supernatural. See, sometimes, and I know a lot of people are praying for the supernatural, and I believe we're going to see it, and God's going to do it. But sometimes I think in looking for the supernatural, we miss some super actions happening. See, sometimes we skip over the simple in search for the significant, and in doing so, we miss out on the supernatural. And the reason why I'm saying supernatural is because if you're not saved with us and you're watching and your first time in church, the idea of supernatural might seem a little weird, but super can be normal for you. But sometimes we skip over the simple and search for the significant, and in doing so, we miss out on the supernatural. Did I miss that one, Josiah? I might have. Did not miss over that. Okay, so out on the super or supernatural. We were praying for the supernatural over there, and I'm like, God, you're going to move on the supernatural. And God started bringing simple things to my mind as I heard Pierre, in our group talk about praying for someone on the street when usually he would walk by. And you'd see that and go, well, that's not that supernatural. But God said, no, that is significant. Because he said he walked by and God's like, go pray for him kind of thing. And he had never done that before. So it was a simple act. But I believe what God's saying is saying, guys, listen, we want the super. But if we start moving in the simple, God's saying, I can get to the super. Because the simple then becomes significant. And then the significance becomes the super or supernatural. And I wanted to tell some parents here today, specifically parents, because I'm in this situation. Maybe you're struggling to feel like a success as a parent. Maybe you felt like a failure. Maybe you've been going, man, I haven't been too super in how I've handled my kids. I haven't been too super in being a husband. I haven't been too super in being a wife or handling my home. I can't seem to get lunches for my kids. You know, they're bringing all the junky thing, and I just don't have time for this, and I can't seem to get a hold of it, and they don't listen to me, and they talk back to me. This isn't, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't feel very super. Because you're looking for something significant as a sign to validate, I'm a super parent. But I'm here to tell you today that the simple things you're doing matter. Some parents need to hear this. That supper you made when you were tired, it mattered. That's significant. Taking your kids on that bike ride after a long day or doing something for them, that is super. Watching grandkids when you wish you probably could be, well, maybe you want to be with the grandkids, but you could be doing something else or having to do that. That is simple, but it becomes significant, which can pave the way for the supernatural. Students, university students, finishing your assignment on time, it's simple, but it could turn into something super. Doing your job with integrity when you could be cutting corners, but you sit there, no one else is looking, and you say, I'm going to do this simple task, and I'm not going to cut corners. I'm going to do it with integrity. That is significant, and it releases the way to something super or supernatural. Giving money to that person on the street, because sometimes I grew up, the idea of I don't have any spare change, but just saying, hey, I don't know what they're going to do with it, but it's something simple. It may be a couple bucks, but it may open the door to something significant, which unlocks the super or supernatural. And instead of just saying, blessed, be warmed and fed, as we said, but you go, no, God, what action are you wanting me to do with this prayer, with this other thing? What is something else that you want to do? Kids, if there's any kids watching, or if there's any kids who've come in and your parents tell you to clean your room, do the simple task and do it, because that is significant to your parents, and it could release something super in the home. Youth, don't talk back to your parents when they say something. Instead of talking back, do the simple thing of saying, yes, Mom, yes, Dad. Pick some simple things. See, we're trying to get to the supernatural and say, I'm ready to pray for limbs and different things like that, and that's going to happen. But I heard God say, you need to be able to start with the simple. I'm walking down the street, and God says, go talk to that person. No, God, I just want supernatural. God, get me. No. God says, go minister to that person. Go give them a hug. Maybe not during COVID, but if God says, go bless this person. That person that's been working the McDonald's drive-through day after day and is feeling discouraged at a job that maybe they don't love. And God says, why don't you just bless them with $20 out of the blue? And you can go, I don't know, I don't have it. But God says, it's a simple act, and you give it, and their heart gets open, and it becomes significant in your life. And who knows where that can lead, that it becomes super. So what we need to realize is this: it's often in the simple that the supernatural is released. It's obeying the simple, listening to God in the simple, doing the simple. Listen, you can take it at a practical level. The simple in your business releases super things if you do it right. The simple in your relationships, if you can work on some simple. What I'm trying to say is, if you take the whole thing and say it's too much, it's overwhelming, my kids, and you get overwhelmed, I need some super change. Yes, you do, but why don't you start with something simple? And when we put into practice the simple in us, God starts to release the supernatural through us, or the super through us. When we put into practice the simple in us, God releases the supernatural through us. Here's the last question culminating we started at the beginning kind of asking, what would it do if a superhero was named after you? Here's the question now. What is the simple it would do if a superhero was named after you? See, we thought of some big grand things, but what is the simple it would do if a superhero was named after you? If a superhero was named after Bob, they say, what's the simple things he does? Well, I know some simple things. He walks down the street and talks to people. It seems simple, but who knows how significant that is for somebody that unlocks the door for the supernatural in someone's life. A couple weeks ago I said, that's what started this. I heard God say, this is going to be a summer of significance, leading to the supernatural. And then I was kind of processing and praying it, and God said, just be ready to do the simple. We're going to have a summer of significance, but it's going to start with us saying, God, what's the simple I can do? I want to be an action figure. I want to be a figure of action. God, where are you wanting me to do some simple things that could change people's lives, that could change relationships, that can change different things? And so the challenge this week is that there's some super inside of you that God wants to release, unique to you and your calling, that you do better than anyone else. Bob talks to people better than anyone else. Brad's really good at evangelizing. There's that super inside of him. You have a super. Say, God, what's the super you want to release? And start doing some simple steps towards that. This week, that's the challenge. What are some simple actions that you can start to put into practice to release the super in you?